Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back to those of us who have come multiple weeks now. Welcome to Making Meaning Through Relationality in an Oral History Project, Amplifying Latino Immigrant Workers' Voices in the Pandemic. We have a really wonderful team of presenters here with us this evening. María Islas-López, Brittny Saldaña, Naomi Perez, Sarahy Plazola, Tony Lemus, and Lucy Snow, along with our wonderful interpreters. And I know you have a great conversation ahead for us. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Maria. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you so much for bringing us all together, but also to make us think about our origin and our directions and where our hearts and our minds are heading and where they have been before and how they make sense in the present. Thank you to Amy Starcheski, the director of Columbia Oral History MA program, for inviting us to be part of this space for connection. And thank you to all of you who are joining us. I know there's people joining us across borders as well and across different states within the United States. So I really appreciate you joining us today. We are all joining you from the Denver metro area in Colorado and following Carly's example in the spirit of healing and education. I would also like to acknowledge the 48 contemporary tribes with historic ties to the state of Colorado. These tribes are History Colorado's partners. We consult with them when we plan exhibits, collect, preserve, and interpret artifacts, do archaeological work, and create educational programs. We recognize these indigenous peoples as the original inhabitants of this land. Presenting at this workshop is really a very special occasion for me. It really brings the project we're all going to be talking about to full circle. Our project began, grew, and it's opening possibilities in the context of my participation in these workshops over the past year. And I can sincerely say that the work that we will be sharing with you today has been deeply shaped by the many voices who have shared their knowledge and practices during these workshop series. And to all those voices, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And that also includes our interpreter for tonight, Alison Corbett, who along with her colleague Aldo Resendiz is allowing us to facilitate the access of this presentation to all our Spanish speaker colleagues and collaborators and community partners and friends. So thank you, both of you. I am a cultural sociologist and I'm a cognitive sociologist currently working at History Colorado, which is Colorado's state historical society. And as you saw in the program, and Caroline already mentioned, I am not alone today. Today, I am joined by a wonderful group of colleagues, community members, and students who, as I often said today, so many different times over the course of the last year, they put their hearts, their hands, and their minds together to co-create a community-led oral history project in partnership with the Centro Humanitario para los Trabajadores, and this is a labor center here in Denver, Colorado. The project documents the experiences of the low-wage Latino immigrant workers in the Denver metropolitan area during the first year of the pandemic. And I am talking here about day laborers, domestic workers, and other men and women employed in the informal economy sector. And we named the project Voices from Centro Humanitario, Labor, Barriers, and Hope in Times of COVID-19. The project explores, and there's a slide there that mentions the name. The project explores the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on this community due to the social inequalities and discrimination, but it also looks at the resilience, solidarity, and hope that exists in the community and that has played such an important role in the way that the community has experienced the pandemic. The wonderful community outreach team of the Centro Humanitario led and curated this project. This team was completely in charge of the design, implementation, and interpretation of the project, which is 100% in Spanish. So for a year, starting exactly on September 21st of 2020, and I'm realizing that's the birthday of my brother in Mexico, who is also watching today, I have had the pleasure of guiding this team to give life to this community oral history project that brought all of us together who are presented here today. And right now on the screen, you see a picture of the project team that we took during the presentation of the project exactly a month ago at History Colorado's Stephen H. Hart Research Center. The project curator and the community oral historians of these projects are Damaso Ahumada, to my left in the picture, and to the right, it's Sarahy Plazola, Blanca Madrid, Guadalupe Martinez, Patti Grado, and Marina Cruz. Sarahy is presenting here today with us, but also I know that Blanca, Patti, and Marina are joining us today as part of the audience. Mil gracias por acompañarnos. Also in the photo is Tony Lemus, the program director of the Centro Humanitario, and the team from History Colorado, including colleagues and student interns that supported this work over the course of the past year at multiple times. Brittny Saldaña, Naomi Perez, and Lucy Snow. Sarah Shikes, the executive director of the Centro Humanitario, is in the photo as well. That presentation that you're seeing that photo from was made possible by the enormous support that I received from my colleague Kimberly Cronwall at History Colorado's Curatorial Services and Collection Access Department. And this was a hybrid presentation with only the narrators and friends and family of the curators joining us in person. This was a very special day for all of us because it was the first time that all of those who had collaborated in this project and who worked together were actually physically in the same space. Because of the pandemic and the social distancing mandates all across the United States and the world, most of the work, including the oral histories, had actually happened virtually. They happened via Zoom or via the phone. So to that point, to the point of the presentation, we had been doing this work really connected and together, but also apart. So I would love to share with you a segment of the presentation of that day. And here is one of our curators, Blanca Madrid, introducing her narrators. I will be posting a transcript of the video in the chat as well, if you prefer to read it. So here is Blanca Madrid.
Buenas tardes, primero que nada, gracias a todos los que nos están acompañando el día de hoy aquí en presencia y a todos los que están a través de Zoom. Mi nombre es Blanca Madrid, soy una conectora del Centro Humanitario y mi rol principal en la organización es conectar a los individuos, a las familias con los recursos que tenemos en el Centro Humanitario. Y gracias a eso tuve la fortuna de entrevistar a la familia Meraz Don Diego, a Fabián Meraz y a Angélica Don Diego. La verdad yo me siento tan emocionada de estar hoy aquí y poder dar voz a esas personas que nosotros escuchamos día con día. El trabajo que hacemos para Guadalupe, Marina, Sarahy y yo es estar escuchando esas historias que muchas veces nos parecen injustas, pero también escuchamos esa esperanza y esas ganas de luchar que nos hacen el seguir trabajando y el estar aquí hoy y compartirlas con ustedes, pues me llena de alegría. Les voy a platicar un poquito de cómo conocí a la familia Meraz conmigo. Ellos llegaron al Centro Humanitario para pedir recursos y los habíamos estado ayudando a través de alrededor, como de 6 meses. Sí. Cuando Fabián nos platicó esto que le había sucedido, pues a mí me pareció desgarrador de cierta manera. Y logramos completar la entrevista. Fue un día domingo, diciembre 13, alrededor de las 7 de la tarde, a través de Zoom, aquí en Denver, Colorado, donde estábamos y para platicarles y ponerles en perspectiva quién es la familia Meraz Don Diego. Fabián es un soldador de oficio. Él ha estado aquí en Colorado alrededor desde hace 13 años. Y Fabián nos cuenta que él nunca había experimentado esa escasez, esa sensación de necesidad. Se describe él como él antes de la pandemia. Él tenía un trabajo estable, un trabajo donde él recibía un cheque cada viernes. Y decía, yo era una persona que me podía dar ciertos lujos. Mi familia podía salir a comer los fines de semana. podíamos comprar los teléfonos que estaban de moda. Y llega la pandemia y todo cambia. Fabián pierde su trabajo, Fabián se ve en la necesidad de conseguir trabajos temporales. Y por su parte, Angélica era una ama de casa y también ella jamás había experimentado esa escasez mientras había estado en Estados Unidos. Y Angélica nos dice, es que lo más difícil para mí fue mantener el equilibrio emocional de mi familia. Porque a pesar de los presupuestos era difícil, pero lo podía lograr. Pero tener ese equilibrio emocional era muy difícil para él. Entonces, vamos a ver el videoclip de Fabián, por favor.
Fíjese que a raíz de esta pandemia me tocó, la única vez que me ha tocado aquí desde que yo vivo en Colorado. Como no tenía trabajo estable, pues yo buscaba de alguna manera de dónde agarrar dinero. Entonces me tocó irme a trabajar con un señor, que no voy a decir su nombre, pero me hizo quebrar cemento. O sea, le estoy hablando de aproximadamente unos 60 pies cuadrados, yo creo, de concreto a puro marro, porque no entraba el trascabo hacia adentro de la propiedad donde teníamos que quitar esa banqueta. Entonces yo tardé en destruir esa banqueta aproximadamente 10 horas de trabajo. Me dio $40. Créame que me sentí...
Explotado.
Explotado, exactamente.
If you want to see more of the presentation, I am dropping a link to the recording and transcript here right in the chat. You can learn more about all the program curators and the team member in that link as well. There's a photo album that where you can explore more. So this project is part of the initiative I manage at History Colorado called Museum of Memory. The Museum of Memory is a public history initiative founded by our executive director, Don DePrince, about 6 years ago. And our goal in the initiative is to collaborate with Colorado communities, particularly those communities whose stories have long existed only in the margins, to co-author their shared stories and explore their past on their own terms. And we do these through workshops where people share their memories of place, community-led collection of oral histories and photographs, and community activities and gatherings to share these histories. And usually these sharebacks with the communities involve the arts. At the same time, because all the oral histories, photos, and objects that community members collect in our projects become part of History Colorado's permanent collection of our museum and archive, it really allows History Colorado to build a historical archive that is more inclusive and truly respects all the communities that call Colorado home. What we are presenting today are not the oral histories of the project per se, and soon you will be able to listen to the story through History Colorado's archive, but also through the Museum of Memory website. Today, instead, we will be telling the story of how the project came together, and by doing so, we hope to show how the project connected all of us who are part of the project. And then we're going to be reflecting on what it has meant to relate to each other, ourselves, and the community through the process of recording, sharing, and amplifying the voices of the project narrators. And these voices are the ones that have been anchoring us all the way through, and that truly anchor the many ways that we can see relations within the project. And we really hope that you can see these relations as well. And I'm expecting that you might see some forms of relations that we have not even begun to conceive of. So as you follow along with our conversation, we invite you to think about a couple of questions. First, how can you relate to an oral history project? Whether you are a community member, an oral historian, an activist, an artist, a student, a museum professional, a professor. And second, as I think you will see, this project attempts in many ways to explore relationality beyond the dyad of the interviewer and the narrator. So if you are already involved in an oral history project, I invite you to imagine opportunities for creating reciprocal connections beyond those that might already exist in your project. So I think it's time for us to start sharing what the project has been and how it came together. So where does the story of the project begin? Tony, if you want to start us.
Absolutely, more than happy. Greetings, everybody. My name is, like Maria said, Tony Lemus. I'm the program director at Centro Humanitario. I was going to say greetings from sunny Colorado, but the sun is already fading, so still a little bit sunny. Like Maria was sharing, Centro Humanitario, we are an organization that works mainly with day laborers, domestic workers, and I would say in general, low-wage workers. We provide education, we provide ways of building the community and creating strength in this community of workers. So they know their rights, they're able to fight for those rights, they're able to build community. And especially for us, what it's important is for them to understand that they're agents of change within the community that they live in. So that has been the focus of our organization throughout almost 20 years. Around February, March of last year, as we have all experienced, our community of workers started experiencing the difficulties that the COVID-19 pandemic was bringing. Throughout this time, as it's all known by, I imagine, all of us, communities of color, immigrant communities have been those that have been most affected by this pandemic. Health, finances, relations. Many of them have families overseas. And so this has created a lot of turmoil within their communities. Centro Humanitario at that point pivoted from what our objective has been to trying to connect this community of workers with funding. And we were able to tap into different funds. There's been a statewide initiative of providing funding for those workers that have no access to a stimulus check or unemployment, to be able to connect them with funding. And through this work that we have been able to distribute this funding to the communities, we have been privy to their stories. We were able to connect with what they were experiencing. And as it always happens with these communities of color, of low-wage workers, of immigrant workers, these are stories that are unknown to our community at large. No one knows what these communities have been experiencing, these families, these individuals. And so we, in our team and in the staff at Centro Humanitario, we came to a situation where we asked ourselves a question, and it was, what do we do with all this knowledge, with all this treasure that we have in our hands? What do we do with, how do we let everyone else know what these people are experiencing? So at that point, I would say was around June of last year, June, July of last year. Through the knowledge that we had of the initiatives that History Colorado was having with working with different communities, I approached María Islas-López I have to say, besides our professional connection, we are friends. And so we, through those Zoom happy hours, we connected and we started talking about the possibilities. And so I would love for Maria then to share from her side what those possibilities were.
Thank you, Tony. It just brought me back to the beginnings of the pandemic and what it meant for all of us personally and professionally. So let me tell you a bit about what was happening at the time from my side of the story, which is History Colorado. So soon after the pandemic started, and I would say perhaps like a couple of weeks after the pandemic started, we launched a statewide initiative that we called in History Colorado, History in the Making COVID Collecting Campaign. And while the campaign was very successful by the time that I was connecting with Tony, for the first 3 months at inviting community members to share their stories of the pandemic, and it was really crowdsourced based, we realized that to reach the stories of those that the pandemic had really hit the hardest, particularly the Latino, Hispanic, and Chicano community, we would really need to establish intentional partnerships in the community that also respond to community needs to document their experiences during the pandemic. And this is also because when the communities are being hit so hard by a tragedy like the pandemic, also there is no time to be reflecting and to kind of like do the first step to actually be sharing their stories. So at the time, History Colorado then received funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities through a Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act to pursue a series of community engaged collecting efforts centering Latino, Hispanic, and Chicano voices. And Voices from Centro Humanitario was one of those projects. And that's the way where the connection happened. So Tony, how did you present this project to the community connectoras who then became our curators and oral historians?
So as Maria was saying, at that point, we decided to go ahead with the project. As I mentioned before, we were connecting the community with funding, and the main actors of this were a team of connectoras or community connectors that were the ones that were getting into those stories of those families. And so what I did was basically go to them and give them the challenge. It was like, okay, we need to go through this process. You need to go through this process of being trained or being equipped and continue this connection that you have with this community of workers, these families of immigrants, and get to those stories, but with a purpose. It's not only just to having a chat, but with the purpose of being the conduit, being the voice of those individuals, of those families, being able to share the stories with them, their stories, with the community at large. And so they all took that challenge. They were willing to do it, and they were willing to work with Maria, and that's how it happened.
And while those conversations were happening on the side of Centro Humanitario, I really started working on a series of workshops and designing a training specifically for Centro Humanitario, for which I drew heavily on reflections about the connections between storytelling, memory, the self, and community building. And in developing the curriculum, and after learning about the Centro Humanitario's needs for this project, I also reconnected with my initial training as a sociologist back in the National University of Mexico and the oral history tradition in Latin America, which really conceives oral history as a tool for transforming the social relations in the present and for pursuing those better futures that we imagine. And this intention really aligned with the principles, practice, and goals of Museum of Memory. And I remember that in the earlier conversations that I had with Tony, we had talked about having 4 workshops, and then we will have like the collecting effort led by them. But at the end, we ended up having 12 workshops, and these don't really include all the group and individual meetings that we had to prepare for the presentation at History Colorado. So here is a screenshot actually of one of our oral history workshops in February. And I think this was the first time that actually Brittny joined us in the workshop. And I really do not remember exactly what Marina said, who is right below Sarahy, but I do remember, as you can tell, that it made us laugh all day. And this is one of the most beautiful experiences and memories of the pandemic that I have. So I think then what happened during those times of the workshops in Sarahy?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarahy Plazola. I was one of the interviewers as well as the photographer for this project. I'm a first-generation Mexican immigrant born in Jalisco, Mexico. And a lot of the work that I do relates to the immigrant experience. I had the pleasure of working with Maria, like she was talking about, not only as a guide for this oral history project, but also as a personal mentor. I began with Centro Humanitario as a volunteer for this project, and I absolutely poured my heart out from the beginning, just like the rest of the interviewers that were part of this project. I was completely new to the term of oral histories. I was actually doing my own oral histories already with my own family, mostly my elders. So I had been doing informal oral histories. So just experiencing this and being part of this whole process was very eye-opening for me. We did about 12 workshops in the course of about 2 to 4 months before we actually began interviewing people in the community for these stories. We started learning about what oral history was, how storytelling brings communities and people together, and it also gives us a sense of identity based on history and experiences. We also learned the basic understandings of what an ethical interview was, and as well as a process and protocols we had agreed on as a team and the purpose of our project itself. We dive deeply into the different types of interviews, and I think that was one of the moments that I realized that a lot of the interview process is unstructured because we tend to go deep into a conversation with our narrators based on what they're telling us. And the art and the beauty, I think, of storytelling is just remembering our past, our histories, memories, but the importance of an interviewer is following up with open-ended questions. And that's just to place value on special memories or details that really enrich the narrator's stories. So through storytelling, we are documenting history. We are joining our narrator on their moments, their memories with empathy and curiosity. So this was just a whole process that I kind of already knew in my heart, but it wasn't a very formal training. So it came very natural to me. I was thankful to receive all this informal training from Maria, who is also a Mexican woman, and we can relate to the mannerisms of our own people because we come from the same culture. After going through the workshops, we began to interview each other as a team and got to practice before actually doing the interviews with the community. And the interviews were held via Zoom or phone call, obviously because of the pandemic, and we weren't able to actually see our narrators and our team physically. And some of us found that we would rather do the interviews via Zoom because then we're able to virtually see our narrators. So I do believe there was a bit of a loss of connection between the interviewer and the narrator just because not being in the same space. Because after this project, I actually took on my own oral history project, and I have been doing interviews in person. And there's just a different type of connection and trust you get to build with individuals simply by being in the same space. During the process with Maria and learning about oral histories, I was connecting with my community by helping them with resources. Especially, I am in charge of the rental assistance here at Centro Humanitario, so I'm able to give that resource to people, which allowed me to develop trustworthy and just trustworthy relationships for months with different people of the community. And the narrators I chose for this project, I still have a connection with. I probably talk to them once a week since doing the project, since helping them with rental assistance. And the other interviewers as well also picked narrators that they had a close relationship with. I know they still hold those connections with the narrators, so we all picked families that had been getting to know for months or years now. When the interviews with the narrators were done, the interviewers and myself noticed very similar themes in the stories, something that our Latino communities have in common, regardless if we're going through a pandemic or even if we live on different sides of a city. We saw themes like illness, because many people got sick, financial hardships, mental health issues, job loss, a lot of themes of faith, because our community is very strong and resilient, a lot of faith in God and religion, and just faith in a better future. So these themes tended to be constant in our Latino community, but we also saw these issues increase during the pandemic. The narrators have been part of this whole process even after the interview. So even now that we had that museo event at History Colorado Museum, we are still in contact with our narrators. And their consent was asked once the videos were done, when they were transcribed, when the visuals were added, when the interviewers chose sections of the audio clips. We were also always asking for their consent. So it was like a constant talk and interacting with them through the process. And because we had such a close connection with the narrators, many other stories and experiences came up even after the interviews. And as an organization, we always try to support and offer as many resources as we can. So we are giving continuation to these stories past their COVID experiences, through access to the community to listen to these stories, and also encouraging the community to share their stories to Centro Humanitario.
And so I just want to jump in quickly. Sarahy is really talking about the process that went through the training, but I think at the end it's also bringing up the process of the moment of the project where we began facilitating conversations about interpretation, about access and preservation with the project team. And we together answered questions like, how were we going to share these oral histories with the community? You already saw a sample with the recording that we played. What would we be sharing? How would we bring community into the process as well? And how to make sure that we had all in place for these oral histories to be accessible for all the communities, not only available, as I've learned from our curator from oral history, Rachel Storm at History Colorado. So at that time, I was also having parallel conversations with History Colorado's registrar, Amy Niles, and our curator of oral history, Rachel Storm, for which I'm deeply grateful for their guidance and support for this project. And we collaborated to align the consent process and record sharing to facilitate anonymous donations and to fully protect the identities of those who wish not to be identified. And this was extremely important because of the vulnerability of the immigrant worker community given immigration status and other personal reasons. And what is really interesting is that after listening to a selection of her story during the public presentation and watching her video clip and her story comes to life, one of the narrators who had chosen to be anonymous really asked us now that she wanted her name to be included in the archives so her family and everybody else knew it was her whose experience was narrated. And Brittny was central in the work that we've been doing at providing access to these stories. So Brittny.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittny Saldaña. I was the main indexer for this project. I became a member or like part of this project probably like halfway through. Most of the interviews were done. The process of identifying themes was in the move. And I came in just to listen to these stories for multiple hours. At first, I assumed they had asked me to join this because Maria knows like 2 or 3 Spanish speakers in the museum, and she was just like, which one's available? No, it turns out that this was actually a project that I personally really wanted to join because I am a big fan of Centro Humanitario. I had volunteered with them before. They had helped family and other members of my community along the way, not just before the pandemic or during the pandemic, but yeah, multiple times. So when I found out what the actual project was about, I was like, please let me in. And yeah, I was supposed to listen to everybody's stories. I did it for hours, I'd say. Transcribing, indexing, and interpreting these stories until if there were stories of people I had never met, and yet I knew these stories like they belonged to my family, which they might as well had. Stories in Spanish, stories of people that I did know, it turned out. And it was just a wonderful time to be spending this, even if it was virtual and I didn't actually get to meet anyone in the team besides Maria until last month. Yeah.
Thank you, Brittny. And you know, and part of the conversations of access and the conversations of how are we going to be sharing these stories was also the understanding that in addition to having all these stories being available through our permanent collection, there was also the need for us to be supporting the Centro Humanitario curators at the selection of the clip, not at the selection, but actually coming to life and bringing those selections of meaningful parts of the clips that they had already selected to life, and to be able, so they could be able to share them with the rest of the community. And in this process, Naomi was a very important element to help us with that. Naomi, please share us.
Thank you, Maria. Well, my name is Naomi Perez, and I came onto the project in May of this year. And I came on as an intern. I didn't really know what I was going into, but to me, community work has always been really important, especially because I am a first-generation American citizen. I come from a family of immigrants, and so I know how deeply affected my family and my community were when the pandemic first happened. And I remember when I interviewed with Maria and Tony, I was in Mexico, and I was like, no, like I'm in Mexico. And then when I started working as an intern, I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then I finished the project here in Denver, Colorado. So I think that experience kind of showed me kind of like the beauty of working through a pandemic, where like I was able to do it all virtually. And what I was doing is I was working closely with the curadoras, and they were telling me like, these are the clips that are important, that are vital to the story. And I was taking some interviews that some were like an hour long, and I was cutting them down to highlight these pieces that were kind of like the main portion of the story, because they didn't tell it all, but they did tell the struggles. And throughout this, I was also working on interpreting the clips and transcribing them in both English and Spanish. I was working very closely with Lucy while we were working on setting up the clips for the presentation. And speaking of clips, one of my favorite clips is where Pati Grado, one of the project curators, she is talking about her experience providing resources as a conectora in the community. And Pati was interviewed by Marina Cruz, and I want to say that they are both present here today, which is really lovely. But this clip really spoke to me because I've also worked closely with the community, but I've also been on the side that needs help. And so it was really interesting to see both sides of the story, especially because I've lived both sides of the story.
Después de la pandemia es desolada, preocupada, con miedo, de no saber qué nos espera y de saber que no tienen un trabajo estable, que no tienen derecho a ningún beneficio, aún y a pesar de que hay gente que tiene 30 años colaborando en este país, pagando taxes y no tienen derecho a nada, y la siento totalmente afectada. Yo estoy súper orgullosa de nuestra comunidad, de esa resiliencia que tenemos, porque a pesar de no tener nada, ahí están. Ahí siguen luchando día a día hasta el día de hoy.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Naomi. And as you saw in these clips that we've been showing to you, photography plays a really important role here. So I would really love if Sarahy can join us to talk about her photos, but also the photos that became the image that is also telling a narrative, a visual narrative.
Yes, this is actually my favorite part. So after listening to the oral stories that once they were indexed by Brittny and Naomi's editing work, I was able to re-listen to the stories in further detail. And as an artist and photographer, I started to visualize and also relate to the stories. I view photography in this project as a way of giving narrators identity. I feel like photography is a component of visual narrative to give life to people, to prove they existed. And I think it's really sad when we have loved ones and we don't have a single photo of them. And I personally went through that myself. When my mother passed away, I realized I didn't have very many photos of her. So that was a huge moment in my life. And I took photography as a visual weapon to keep memories and people alive. So the portraits you guys see are 3 out of the 7 narrators and their families that we interviewed. I would book a time to come and visit them to their homes, so we would have a conversation together on whatever they wanted to talk about. Usually it was about their COVID experience or other personal experience they were going through. So it was a very unique relationship that was built right in that moment. But because before then I had only heard the oral stories and not actually been in a huge contact with them. I would take photos as they talked, or like Mr. Valverde's photo with his wife, that one was set up. Mr. Valverde was very kind and inviting and actually was very trustful of having conversations about his family with me. And he also talked a lot about how much he loved his grandkids and about how him and his wife got COVID and were sick for some time at home. And the Mraz family pictured in the left middle area. I spent around 40 minutes with them having a conversation about how they were doing and Mr. Mraz's current job and the rental situation, because they were going through a little bit of a rough time at that moment. And the little girl was a star. I was able to actually capture some really candid moments of the mom and her playing. So I was blessed and thankful to experience moments of joy while while I was behind the lens. A common theme I saw in the portrait photos was family love and family unity. And I actually didn't notice that until I looked at the photos and I was editing and realized that a lot of the portrait photos were just family photos. The narrator obviously was included, but other family members were also in photos. And it's a common theme in Latino population that we always prioritize family. We prioritize unity in our homes. And I feel like that was a huge motivator for the community, the Latino community especially, just having family love and having unity. I feel like that moved us along and helped us get through the pandemic. The other three photos you guys see are from Mexico and Denver. Some narrators didn't want their photo taken, and that was respected. So I listened to the audios again and tried to evoke an emotion with the photos. The Mexico photos represent that many of us Mexican immigrants leave behind a whole family, behind a life across the border. And the other photos I connected with on a personal level. My parents were also immigrants. They were both only Spanish-speaking individuals, so those photos don't directly represent the exact words spoken in the audios, but they represent my memories, they represent emotions, they represent my parents, they represent Sarahy as an individual with a story as well. And the reason why I picked black and white is because I feel like black and white is also a color, and it gives me a feeling of nostalgia as well. And I was actually able to hand over many of these photos to Lucy, who was in charge of almost handling my photos and putting some of the videos also together.
Thanks, Sarahy. Appreciate the intro. Hi, my name is Lucy Snow. I'm the digital media and access intern at History Colorado's Museum of Memory and a senior anthropology major at the University of Denver. I've been working with Maria for the past year to produce the online and audiovisual content for all of our Museum of Memory projects. So I actually joined the Voices of Centro Humanitario project more towards the end of the process, after the oral histories had been collected and curated. I assisted with the audio collages that were being completed by Naomi, and especially combining that media with Sarahy's beautiful photography as part of the sharing step of this project to really take these stories and amplify it for multiple audiences. So as we're really just collecting and organizing all these materials, it really became clear that the digital, modes of collection that were utilized as a result of the pandemic actually presented a great opportunity for access and dissemination in both in-person and online formats. So this actually really just opened up like larger conversations about access and really what is the best way to utilize this media to its fullest extent. And with this project specifically, kind of where we landed was on these short videos or teasers that really center a significant story that was selected by our curators from our narrators, combined with that very impactful photography to encapsulate the project and also to entice people to learn more about it, so that we can connect these community stories, both with the community that they come from, but also with the wider public community of Colorado that we're trying to reach. So these also had continued use for us. We used these videos for promotional material as well, that you can see on the right there for Instagram and Facebook, again, contributing to that greater visibility of these voices as much as we could provide. So I worked especially with Sarahy, Naomi, and Maria to really just maximize the impact of reaching these stories. I feel incredibly grateful for Sarahy trusting me with your photography and your artistry to transform them and translate them to this video format that we ended up going for. I think it's really meaningful to combine these together. I think it really visualizes these stories as a unified exhibit. And I think, I would love to share with you guys my favorite story from the project, which is an interview by the curator, Guadalupe Martinez, with Senor Valverde, reflecting on the role of community solidarity in the pandemic. This was actually the first video that I ever made or worked on with this project, and it was very impactful for my connection just in really bringing these projects to life. It just felt so much more real once I could see all these stories come together. So I'm just gonna play it.
Que mi esposa tuvo que estar internada en el hospital fue lo más difícil, y que ella estuviera sola y yo en casa sin poderme mover. Mis hijos también estuvieron positivos al COVID-19, mis nietecitas, que son lo más hermoso que tengo hasta ahorita, mis preciosas muñequitas, mis nietecitas que las quiero tanto. Pues bastante apoyo tuvimos de la comunidad, de los hermanos de la iglesia que de una manera u otra nos hacían llegar. Nos traían comida, nos dejaron en la puerta muchísimo mandado. Bendito sea Dios que eso nos ha ayudado bastante. Si no hubiéramos tenido ese mandado, si no hubiéramos tenido todo eso con qué comer, porque había ocasiones en que mi esposa y yo no nos podíamos ni levantar para poder cocinar, para poder calentar agua para un té, un café o algo. Le digo yo, solamente el Señor que mueve todas esas familias que nos apoyaron bastante, que había ocasiones en que la puerta no la podíamos abrir porque había bastante mandado. Había un plato de comida, había una sopa calientita, y siempre estaban en constante comunicación preguntando qué necesita, qué se le ofrece, y me decían qué se le antoja. Le digo yo, lo que ustedes puedan. Ahí se mira la mano del Señor en todas esas familias que nos apoyaron muchísimo. Gracias.
Yeah, so I mean, this was kind of the major part of collecting the content for this project, and then the next step was returning this media to the curators and narrators to just get their approval and make sure that everything was as best as it could be, which I know Sarahy and Maria can comment on as well.
Thank you, Lucy. And well, yeah, and Sarahy, you can tell us a little bit about that process of sharing the videos with the narrator. And then if Lucy, Brittny, Naomi, Sarahy, or anybody who was in the presentation can just say something about the presentation itself, and then I would like afterwards just to tell if Tony can just wrap up this conversation with what are his thoughts about what are the next steps for the project. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A that can incorporate our own reflections with the meaning of this project as we are responding to questions. So any of my lovely co-creators and collaborators, if you can share your experience about the presentation. What was the presentation? Who was there?
Well, for myself, after the audios and the videos were completed, I was able to share with my own narrators because I did 2 interviews, and I made sure that everything that was on the audio clip and on the photos were correct and they represented themselves. So I definitely got their consent afterwards. After all of that was okayed, we were all preparing for the big day. I remember being extremely nervous. But all the narrators and their families were invited. It was a beautiful moment because we had narrators, we had the whole team, we had Maria, we had the help of Naomi and Brittny and Lucy just working in the background to actually make this whole event happen. So without them, this wouldn't have happened. And also with those stories, this wouldn't have happened either. So it was just a beautiful moment to share the same space with the narrators while sharing their stories and really seeing the power that held and how empowered they felt sharing their stories with everyone and everyone that was also connected on Zoom.
Yeah, just to slightly build on you, Sarahy, I think Naomi and I can definitely relate to connecting this beautiful in-person event with all of the people who attended on Zoom as well was very unique and had its own challenges, but was very meaningful in the end in order to try and connect with as many people as possible, with what was a very connected presentation.
Yeah, so thank you. And as I said, it was the first time that all of us we were together. And I think it was also the first time that actually Naomi had been to the museum as well, and it was a truly special moment for all of us, and especially having the narrators there as our main guests and being able to connect with them in ways different than we had connected before. So what are the next steps for the project? And I'm just gonna say on the end of History Colorado, we are in the process of finalizing all the documents that are needed and the inventory, so we can share all these materials with our curator of oral history, Rachel Storm. So these could permanently become part of our permanent collection. And this is something that is coming soon. I know Rachel is here. So Rachel, please keep your eyes open for the materials that are coming soon. And Tony, I would love if you can share with us, what are the next steps for this project from the perspective of Centro Humanitario? And hopefully we can have some time for Q&As, and we would love to hear what are the comments or what generated in your minds for all of us who are visiting today this presentation. So Tony, please.
Thank you. So for Centro Humanitario, this is not the end of the project, it's the end of what we consider phase one. Our team has been went through the training. They were able to experience firsthand the process of collecting the stories and putting together this presentation. We are going to be filming another more of a conversation between the curators, Maria and myself, where that's the one that we will be disseminating to our membership, to our community. I have given the challenge to our team that themselves now as the pros, the ones that have experienced this process, they will be now in charge of training others in our team, people that they're working in their own networks, the staff that was not part of this project, to also be collectors of stories, as well as preparing a workshop that we would probably be sharing in the near future, both with our national coalitions, the National Day Laborers Organizing Network and the National Domestic Workers Alliance, so we can train other organizations around the country that do similar work as ours to be able to have their own projects and present these stories. So, like I said, for us, this is just the end of phase one. There's way more to come, and we want to continue amplifying those voices that have not been heard in our communities. So I think with that, that's about it, right? We would love to hear from you if you have any questions for us or for any of the members of our team, because this has been a life-changing experience for everyone involved.
Thank you so much. Lucy, if you could stop screen sharing, I want to see everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. I'm going to clap because I miss the sound of like applause now that we're all on online and muted. It's like, it's a different sound. This is awesome, but like, this is what I feel. Thank you all so much for being here and coming together to share your amazing work with us and your amazing selves. I feel a huge amount of love that your team has for each other, and thank you for sharing that with us tonight and your narrators and all that great work. We do have a couple minutes for some questions, so feel free to, there's already one in the chat, so I'll read that out. And, oh wait, no, it's a comment. Thank you, Emma. It's an excited comment. But yeah, others, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can read those out, or feel free to unmute and, oh my gosh, Han, your dog. Feel free to unmute and ask your question out loud. Yeah, thank you. Also, I realized just now that I was speaking very fast. I did that thing of excited rambling. So thank you, interpreters, as well, for being here this whole time and keeping up with all of this. It's awesome that we're doing it. Oh, actually, I saw a raised hand. Yeah, Ruth, go for it. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say I'm so happy, proud of this amazing project. I am a student, and I think this is this is the way to go. I'm planning to do oral histories for my research. Right now, what I want to ask, I think, is 2 questions. First, congratulate you from this amazing work. Muchísimas felicidades. Es demasiado inspirador para mí. Me da mucha felicidad. Quiero hacerlo en Nueva York. Entonces, una pregunta es, one question, how I going to, like, if there is possible that I can contact with any of you, with Dr. María Islas-López, or with anyone else in the project. And you mentioned that you create a curriculum for training. It is possible that this training is accessible for others like me that want to also learn about more how to do oral histories. And the other question is, I think it will be to Tony Lemus, that he mentioned that you're planning to partner with other I think organizations nationally, I will say, but do you have a specific already organizations, especially in New York, or you waiting for someone to contact you? I don't know if I explained myself.
Yes, you did. I can jump in, Maria, while you think of an answer. Ruth, yes, we are very excited about being able to share this with other organizations that work with low-wage workers, specifically day laborers, domestic workers. We have not been specifically in contact with any of them. Due to COVID, all the national convenings that we have periodically, they're just happening virtually. A lot that it's happening nationally, that it's affecting the labor movement, it's been very pressing at the moment, so we haven't had time to delve on the side of training. But I'm hoping that in the very near future, we will be able to do that. Like I said, we have regular meetings where we're asked to present workshops, and my hope is that we will be able to present a workshop based on this work and be able to disseminate it nationally. So that's my answer.
And thanks, Ruth, for the question. And well, it's really interesting because as I said, and a lot of the oral history work, the practice you actually learn by seeing and by the passing on of knowledge from other oral history projects. And that's why I say that this is a project that actually has been deeply in conversation, even though some oral historians have not known that, but it's deeply in conversations with what I've heard from them and their practice. So it's really about a combination of the work that we're doing in Museum of Memory and the approach that we have for doing this community-led work, a combination of my own training as a sociologist, a combination of everything that I've learned from all the oral historians that I've been in conversation with, and that's why I honor their work as well. But also the particular training that was developed for Centro Humanitario was very much connected with this much larger understanding of the role of storytelling. So I think that opportunities for learning about oral history as a practice exist in multiple forms in museums and in books, etc. But I also think that it's important to always think about how do we teach oral history and how does oral history can show up with the needs of different organizations. So I'll be very happy, Ruth, to connect offline to talk more about this and to continue the conversation. But I mean, I don't know if there's more questions or not, but if there are no questions, I would really love if one of you, of any of you, can actually share a little bit about what is the meaning of the project for you? What has the project meant for all of you from your unique perspectives? And I think we've seen already a glimpse of that from some of the comments from Sarahy and Naomi and Lucy, but it would be just lovely to perhaps like close this reflection with your own reflection about how is this project helping you relate to yourself, to the others, to the community, to all of us? So, and I hope I didn't jump on the questions from other people.
No, go for it. I love this.
Please, so not calling on names. We need some brave souls first here, as I always say.
I can start.
Okay,
So after this project, I definitely view oral history as a tool to keep stories and people and history alive. If we don't have documentation of people, that existence can be forgotten. So we're preserving these stories in audio and visual to help narrators endure, to speak up for themselves even when they're gone. So it's just a preservation of long-term of these stories. And I feel like it shows the relationship past culture, past being part of the same ethnic group, but it was a human experience. We all went through COVID, we all went through the pandemic. And through the sharing and accessibility of these stories, we're able to bring awareness to marginalized communities together past skin color and race. And also, as far as myself, I feel that by connecting with these stories, this is also a history of me. By connecting with other Latino community members, this is also my story. So it brings communities together, and I think that's really beautiful.
For me, I think the question is what this project meant to me. Like I mentioned before, I come from a family of immigrants, and even before I jumped onto the project, my family, I knew the reality of what it meant to be an immigrant in a pandemic. I remember I got kicked out of school because of the pandemic. They kicked us out of the dorms. And as soon as I went home, I was no longer just a full-time student. I was a full-time student, and I was a full-time provider for my family because they all lost their job because of the pandemic. And I was the only one that was allowed to keep working due to my status as a citizen. And I remember when I started hearing these stories, I realized that my family was not the only one. And I started to wonder how many more families out there are just like mine and are just like the ones that I'm working with their audios. Like, so many families were going through the same thing. And for me, it was really important that we put these stories out there, because these stories are very real and these stories are happening daily. And sometimes we don't even know what a person is going through. And for that reason, it was really, really important for me to make sure that these stories were properly put out there, that they were heard, and that they were accessible, and that there wasn't a language barrier, because all of the interviews were in Spanish. And it was important for me to translate these stories in a way that made sense, because, like I said, it was important that these stories be understood. And for that reason, this project was really important for me. And I think I'm really proud of my team, because I do think we accomplished that.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump off what you said, Naomi, about accessibility, because I think that was a big part of how I got gained a big connection to this project. You know, I was coming in as a student. I'm an English speaker. I'm not an immigrant, and I have kind of a somewhat separated view from this for this project. But that being said, it did, as we were kind of focusing on this theme of visibility, it actually did make me connect to my experiences and even my own family history. My grandfather was an immigrant from the Philippines, and he never got to share his story in any public setting, and was actively discouraged from it by the US government. So being able to take part in a project that emphasizes visibility so much, especially to stories that have been largely overlooked when reflecting on COVID, it was really incredibly important, considering the histories of silence influence that I was aware of. So I'm really just grateful at the end of the project to piece together and see how these different contributors have created such a well-rounded final product. And as a person who's not from this specific community, the work that the project team completed really did make me relate more and connect with this living history as part of my own Colorado community.
I think I can jump in quickly and I think it's no secret for anybody how much I respect and I value and I feel deeply honored to have worked with this amazing group of co-creators and collaborators and I can say now friends. And in my sense, it has been a really deep experience. One, to be able to have a job that really allows me to do this work and to work in an institution that aligns with this kind of work. And I think that's something really important. A lot of the questions that I've been asked when I am presenting this work, this kind of work is, how do you do this? How do you do this? And I think like the first step to answering that question is like, you need institutional support that is willing to have these conversations, that is willing to spend hours negotiating what is the right consent form to amplify these voices, and that is willing to feel vulnerable and actually not having the control of what goes into the archive, but actually co-create and collaborate with communities. So that's super important. And I'm deeply grateful for that, for History Colorado and the initiative that I'm honored to be part of. But beyond that, it has been deeply interesting for me to actually connect in a project in which I have to say I connect for the first time as an immigrant as well. Even though I'm an immigrant, but there was something to say about the way that I could understand myself as an immigrant, and that I could understand myself through not only working with immigrants, for immigrants, and amplifying the voice of immigrants. And that was super important. And another important aspect for me was a very interesting learning experience for me to understand the ways in which my own academic training was actually challenged by this process. And it has been challenged since I joined Museum of Memory in some ways, with all this idea of co-creation and who holds expertise and knowledge. And go through this very interesting process of knowledge creation, in which in most of the part of the process, as you could tell, I was the facilitator of processes, but I was not necessarily the carrier of knowledge of the experiences of those that we were connecting and were trying to amplify. And that was, for me, was like very deep and deeply transformative. And yeah, and I can talk for hours about this from my perspective, but I think it's just amazing, the fact that we actually managed to do this during the pandemic. Just to begin with, it really amazes me. Naomi, I've always been fascinated by Naomi's experience, that she was telling stories, listening stories about immigration and moving across borders, while at the same time she was herself moving across borders during all this time. So it was like talking again about the way that we all embodied the narratives in our own experiences was really magical. But
I would love to interject a little bit, because I need to recognize that the success of this project to this point has been a key of that success has been Maria's work, because her approach to this project was with care, with really not only trying to understand where all the narrators and the curators were coming from, but also dedicating extra time to leading, but at the same time stepping back, allowing the process to take place without getting her hands in as much, as probably at a point she felt like, oh, I want to get my hands in, because I felt the same way. But I think what we envisioned was having this team be prepared, be equipped, and then just let go and having them be the ones leading the process. And I think all the members of this team felt that respect coming from Maria. And I think that's what really allowed them to flourish. Because I think the growth that my team has experienced working with Maria, learning from her, from her experience, but also feeling empowered has been key. And so I think that I am speaking for my team in saying that yes, this project has been life-changing for them and also for the organization, but it wouldn't be where it is without the work that Maria has put into it. So thank you, Maria.
I think we can spend hours saying thank you to each other. It
was a love fest.
Thank you. And Marina, I mean, I also love that Marina Cruz and Patti Grado and Blanca Madrid are also part of the audience, and Marina is already kind of like jumping in. So thank you, Marina, Patti, and everybody who is there. So it's already at 6:40, we're 10 minutes past time. And so Caroline, I don't know if you want to move forward or if Brittny wants to mention something, not putting you on the spot, Brittny, or however it feels right at this moment.
Thank you. Thank you again so much for sharing this project with us. And as Rujun's comment said, you know, the teamwork aspect of it is really, really incredible and inspiring. And I think we've all learned a huge amount from that part of it, as well as from the oral histories themselves. So thank you again for modeling this for us. It's awesome to meet you all, and let's get dinner. If you're able, our next event is actually going to be a Saturday morning, November 13th. The event is called Oral History and the Keepers of Memory, Knowledge of Past Times and Cultures of Rurality in India. Indira Chaudhry is going to present, which is part of it being a Saturday morning, because by that time she'll be 10 and a half hours ahead of us, I think it is. So I hope you're all able to join us for that event as well. It should be lovely. And please join me in, again, thanking this wonderful team for all of their work and generosity. Thank you.
Thank you.